welcome everybody. Happy New Year. Got a few agenda items here today, but as usual, I don't expect these items to take the whole meeting time. If other folks have any topics they'd like to discuss, feel free to add them in. If you have any you want to mention now to make sure we save time for, go ahead. Let's see. As I mentioned earlier, the TST election results, when I saw it, we have some familiar faces. Fabian Ruffy and I were both elected to serve another 2-year term starting in 2025. Thanks, everybody, for your votes and confidence. I did not vote for myself, by the way. I voted for 2 other people and nominated 2 other people. But so in case you're wondering, I don't know what the rules are about voting for yourself, but I didn't.
Congrats.
Sorry. Oh, thanks. Part of the first early activities will be to elect a chair from among the 5 members. That will be done privately among the 5 members, so not today. Maybe we may even do it in email soon. I'll start an email thread. And then there's also the election of Chief P4 Architect, I believe is the title. What is your title? What was your title, Fabian, last year? Is it Chief Software Architect, Chief P4, something like that?
P4 Architect, I think. Chief
Okay.
P4 Architect, yeah. P4
Okay.
Chief Architect.
All right, yeah, it's some combination of those words, but Fabian was elected that early last year, but that's a yearly election or appointment. It doesn't have to be a TST member. So if anybody's interested in the job, let us know now. And so, yeah, I'm just letting you know that as part of the TST, we will be doing those privately just because that's voting among the TST members only. But except for that, the meeting is public. So let's see. So other agenda items, let me go through what I've got here. And at the end, there should be time to, so the status of Intel releasing Tofino software to open source. If you were unaware, the Tofino compiler backend for P4C has been added to the public P4C repository several months ago now. I believe it might have been around October. That by itself isn't terribly useful. It lets you produce, I think it lets you produce assembler output files, but then there's no model to run them on in that open sourcing. There is a private P4Lang repository called Open P4 Studio that is expected to be public very soon now. It might even be within a week, I hope. It includes the Barefoot Runtime API drivers and a x86 binary of the Tofino simulation model, as well as some other pieces that I haven't listed here, but it does not include source code for the Tofino simulation model, and it does not include P4 Insight. But with it, when you successfully build it, that plus a particular version of the open source P4C repository lets you compile source code with the TNA architecture and run automated tests on the simulation model using existing infrastructure that it has for running the Tofino model and setting packets in and running the driver and all that stuff, the runtime. So all that stuff is very imminent to being opened up. At the moment it's opened up, please be patient. There may be a few build issues to work through at the moment it's opened up, but we're very, very close to, like, it's dotting the I's and crossing the T's now. It just might not have all the I's dotted and T's crossed at the moment it's opened up. Yeah, Vlad.
I think what is really critical here is that Intel still hasn't released any statements with regards to NDA.
Yep.
And that makes things still very kind of funky.
Agreed.
So I know that I've asked Intel repeatedly and received absolutely no response. So I think that maybe through Linux Foundation, we can formally raise this issue because otherwise, I mean, I don't think Intel will have the resources to go after the people, but I don't think people will feel comfortable not knowing what's going on, right?
Agreed. Yep. I mean, I will say that so far, I think so. I mentioned, Fabian has been doing a lot of getting this Open P4 Studio repo build working in CI. That's and plus following up on the open sourcing of Tofino simulation model code, and the P4 Insight code is under discussion until now to open source that as well. We'll keep you up to date on the progress of those in the future. But I agree that the status of the Intel NDAs, that people both who got full commercial support for Tofino as well as the people who were university, I believe it's ICRP members, it'd be wonderful if Intel could release a statement saying all these NDAs are now null and void. You can talk about whatever you want. That would be ideal for the public to be able to talk about these things with no cloud hanging over their head. And I agree that it'd be good if folks in the TST can collectively go to Intel and ask about that, and perhaps get support from the Linux Foundation to add to that request.
And the other thing that I think is also will be critical if we want to actually meaningfully support anything, especially in the compiler, but also in the driver. So Intel has architectural documentation on the chip. I do not think it takes a lot of time to release it. It's a PDF that just needs to be again, like the the confidential footer or header should be removed. And again, this is something that I think Linux Foundation should lobby Intel to release.
Sorry, which release the documentation or
Yeah, and specifically the Tofino architectural documentation. Like for example, if you have a bug in the compiler, or if you like suspect that the compiler is not doing something, how you're supposed to fix it, right?
Yep.
It's
I mean,
like anything in the back end you will not be able to do.
So I do not know how this will work out. I will give a guess. Months ago, almost a year ago, I think, when I was approached privately from someone at Intel, a manager at Intel, asking about how this process might go of open sourcing this Tofino source code. I mean, one of the questions will be, after it's open sourced, you could file bug reports on it. Will anybody be reading those and do anything about those? And that's a question that is not settled yet. I would not be surprised if no one at Intel looks at those bug reports, and it's up to I mean, it's open source. Whoever, it'll be up to volunteers or people paid to do it that are not working at Intel to do it. I think it'd be good if Linux Foundation could act as a clearinghouse for information to connect people together that are interested in either paying for that support or receiving money and providing such support. Not as involved in the contracts, but at least connecting people together that are interested in either paying for support for that or providing.
Yeah, I mean, that will definitely be good. But for now, things are even simpler, right? It's just a matter of releasing the documents. And then obviously, because if there's no documentation, I doubt that people will be able to meaningfully help, even if they don't work for Intel, right?
Yep. Yeah, we can certainly lobby for it. We can ask, and it remains to be seen. But yeah, and we can include this in the question, as you say, of asking about the status of NDAs, whether those can be declared null and void.
I think potentially, one thing that the Linux Foundation can also do is, if Intel doesn't want to perform certain technical things, like for example, removing confidential notice from the documentation, that we can help with, right?
Yeah. I mean, we will probably end up doing one of the points I have later on the agenda is Linux Foundation actually did a review of all the P4Lang repository source code looking for odd licensing things, which I'll talk about in detail next. So that would apply to this as well.
Yeah, speaking of that, I don't know if you have it on the agenda, but the SD contains some other third-party stuff.
Yep.
And so I don't know do you plan to cover that?
I plan to talk about that, at least not in full detail, but looking for volunteers who want to dive in the details is my plan today.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
I agree on the documentation. We should probably, there's a lot of valuable information on Tofino in general internally. And it would be nice that not to lose it at all and try to get them to open source it or publish it.
It might be best to try raising this to the P4 governing board level first. And going that route. Deb Chatterjee is the Intel representative to the P4 board. And I'm sure it's probably not fully lying with him, right? But he could at least probably play the part of advocate for P4 to get this released. So we have a governing board meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. But Andy, if you want to reach out to Deb in the meantime.
Yep.
I know, Hari, you've had your hand up for a minute.
Yeah, I have I mean, I mean, one question I have is that what was Intel expecting to gain from this exercise? I.e., why did they engage in what? I mean, what was the thought process behind it? Is it to enable academia? Is it
I have
or
I have a guess, and I can tell you my guess, but it's only a guess. It's to reduce requests on their internal development resources for fixing issues in these things and answering questions about them.
no? But then fixing issues in these things means ASIC, because clearly they're not selling Tofino ASICs anymore,
Not
right?
anymore. Yep.
So if they're not selling
plenty
Tofino,
of ASICs still there, and people still use them, and people still build products. And so it's just a matter of kind of disengaging without causing too much ruckus. But I guess, Harry, maybe then the question is, what is the reason for your question, right?
no, I'm just wondering. I'm just wondering that. I mean, it's sort of like somebody has. So then the next question is, shouldn't the people who have these ASICs in their possession be more involved in solving compiler issues, in making sure that the architecture spec is available and stuff like that, rather than relying on open source community to fix bugs?
I can answer your question. So basically, these people tried, and they couldn't assemble enough cloud to kind of force Intel to do more than, like, whatever Intel is doing is the maximum they could achieve. So they tried hard. There were a lot of options that were discussed. They just didn't work out. Intel wanted substantial amounts of money and all that kind of stuff. And now what people are doing is that some of them are looking for alternatives. Some of them just plan to kind of sell the products to go through the existing inventory of the chips. And I mean, it's not pleasant for anyone, but I think from the community standpoint, what is important is that there's a whole bunch of programmable packet processors out there that can be used for a lot of good and for a lot of research. And we need to do the best we can to enable people to continue moving forward, because so far, there's still no reasonable alternatives, right?
So would Intel be fine with people taking their architecture spec and simply building an ASIC? I mean, that's because if you
I mean, we cannot answer for Intel, but I would say this. First of all, you will not be able to build an ASIC using the Intel's architecture spec.
I mean, you could get close enough. I mean, you could get ideas. You could, expand on it. It's my point. That's the question I have, which is, okay, I can understand them not wanting to do support requests for people with existing ASICs. The other part that I see is valuable to the open source community is as a learning tool. Okay, that this is a programmable ASIC. Here's how programmable ASICs are built. Here is how Switch Silicon is built. And that can enable compiler research, that can enable architecture research. But I don't understand the support model for existing people who have Intel ASICs.
Well, the support model for existing people depends. But for example, I would say that my company provides such support, right?
Okay.
So again, I am limited in what I can do, but I can do a lot more than Intel is willing to do right now.
And there might be private contracts between recent purchasers of Intel Tofinos with Intel to provide software support, which are private contracts that we have no knowledge of.
I see.
They've arranged.
I see.
But
see.
I think the whole point is, Harry, if you think about the open source model, is that a lot of people who are not affiliated with the particular vendor can still provide the support, right?
If they
So-
learn how to be
No,
effective.
but it is different because this is hardware. It is different from, it is somewhat different from, making things run on, it's different from the Linux model, which is really a kernel that you can run on a machine which is widely available.
Well,
Right.
it's the same thing because look, there are bugs in the CPUs as well, right? And so absolutely, if there is a bug in the chip, I will not be able to fix it. Everyone understands that, right? Today, for example, if there is a bug in the compiler, I still not fully equipped to fix that. But with the open sourcing of the compiler, it's getting closer and closer to that. And then with like, for example, we will be able to research crashes better. And then once there is a better understanding of the architecture, you might be able to fix even more. It's a separate question how expensive it is, but it's all possible. Right. So I think, we're going in the right direction. We just need to make sure we go all like as far as we can. That's all.
I will also
I'm just suggesting that this kind of an exercise has not been done before by any company, where they have open sourced ASIC architecture, ASIC compiler, ASIC performance, ASIC compiler accurate models. It's sort of, and relying on open source community to have an interest. But I see where Andy's point is, that this could just be a clearinghouse between.
it's a gift to the world.
Yes.
The world can ignore it.
Harry, think
Yes.
about this. Like, majority of the people in the world use Intel CPUs without Intel provided compiler, right? With a community developed compiler or compilers, in fact, right now.
No, but it is very pervasive. The CPU, Intel CPU, is very pervasive. Pretty much every machine on the planet has an Intel
Well,
CPU.
it was the same thing was happening 40 years ago, and it was not as pervasive, but still worked, right? So there is no reason it should not work. I don't see any particular issues there, right? So if there is, for example, a crash in the model, you can research and see what's going on there. There's also, the code is pretty well commented. Are you trying to say that it's not enough, or are you trying to say it's still?
No, I'm just worried about the different can of worms that has been opened by this exercise.
There is no can of worms, because right now it's all in the community. Intel is not going to do anything anyhow, right?
So let me play out a scenario for you, Vladimir. Let's say, as part of architecture research, somebody decides that it would be cool to have a fixed function unit in the switch pipeline that can do, let's say, encryption, decryption, right?
Okay.
And I add that fixed function block to the model, and P4 language evolves to exploit that model. I evolve the compiler to exploit that.
Okay.
Now the ASIC doesn't support it.
Sure.
Right. So now but the model was meant to be an accurate representation of the Tofino ASIC.
Okay.
So it no longer remains a Tofino model. So this is the kind of thing that I am worried, that.
Well, that's always the worry that someone will fork your open source code. It's the same worry that someone will fork GCC. Someone will fork whatever the other.
No. What I'm trying to say is that somebody who wants to build a different ASIC could use this as an experimental platform to both start off from a compiler, a very well researched model, right? And I'm not saying that. I'm just pointing out that this is a valid direction.
Well,
sure, but I mean, what is the worm? Like
the worm is that it's being used for purposes that Intel didn't intend it for. Intel intended this to be a support exercise for Tofino chip.
So I think let's first of all, let's let Intel worry about what they intended or not intended. I think by now they frankly give up. So I don't think they worry about anything specifically.
Okay. Sorry, I took up a lot of time. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. I would like to move on to the next item, but thanks
Yeah.
for the lively discussion. It's interesting, and I'm sure there'll be future questions later as well. So let me move on.
So,
to-
Andy, just one thing before we finish with that. So, in that bullet that you put, request that Intel release documentation on the Tafina hardware architecture, there is also the SDE documentation. So I think we should just make it more generic, right? So, hardware architecture and SDE, maybe, yeah,
And some of the tutorials they had, maybe. If
So yeah, let's put it this way, Fabian.
Yeah.
So if Intel releases me from the NDA, my videos will go online.
Oh, that's perfect too.
So, but
Just any information to get started with the compiler would be very useful for anyone. I
so
think.
we'll put a lot of stuff online. Right now it's paid. We'll see how it goes, but I need Intel to release me from NDA first.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me move on. Thanks. So Linux Foundation personnel did a review of software licenses in the currently open Git P4Lang projects. They wrote a document which I can link to. So it's not this document. Their report is not this document. This is something I wrote in response. We might publish that other document of their particular recommendations, but high level, one of their recommendations is there's this convention or syntax for putting a comment in source files that contains this string and a colon, and then one of a set of about 50 strings that precisely identify a particular software license precisely. And they recommend adding that to all source files. Most of them would be Apache 2, but if you look in this document here, I suspect there's a few files, either because of the Scapy library, which is GPL v2, or because of eBPF code, which runs inside the kernel. I suspect a small fraction of source files might still be under GPL v2 because of that, those two reasons. There are currently some files that have proprietary and confidential notices from Barefoot or Intel in there, and I've created some GitHub issues to track removing or changing those. But those would best be done by ideally people from Intel who are authorized to make those changes. But I believe the intent was when they were made public, they should have been Apache at the time. So I think they were just kind of not noticed in the shuffle. So it'd be nice. I've created this document for anybody who's interested in working through the mechanics of these changes. Please take a look at this document and contact me, or say so, however you want to contact me. I'd like to, track that, this is not like a stop the world, everything must stop until we get this done. I expect this to trickle out over the next 6 to 9 months. Hopefully that we can get it done. So basically, I think we want to get to a point where, every source file has an explicit license identifier in it. Most of those should be Apache. Hopefully only a handful will be GPL. And then we have ideally some CI scripts that, what's the word I'm thinking of? Sanity checks, linter tools for pre-commit that verify that we have these on all new source files added, and that we're not violating any GPL licenses anywhere. So anyway, this will be, I suspect it's not hard work. It's just, like the hardest parts of this, I think, will be, in some cases, verifying, like you can't just stick an Apache 2 license on a file if you don't know where it came from. If you don't know, if it currently says proprietary and confidential in it, you really shouldn't just stick an Apache license on there and believe you're legally okay. That's stealing, right? Or you're relicensing. Yeah, Vlad?
So I think one of the most critical things is Scapy for PTF.
Yep.
I believe that in the lawyers were definitely not right saying that it was a problem, but can we get a kind of more reasonable conclusion from Linux Foundation? Is that something we should even be worried about?
So there's two possible responses, and they're in this document that I've started making notes. I have a whole section just on Scapy, page long or so. There's two possible responses. One is, yes, maybe we find out that if you do import SCAPI in a Python program, it doesn't need to be GPL'd.
Right.
But even if it does, it's all test code, right? You don't need it to run. You don't need it. It's not inside of the P4C executable. It's not inside of the behavioral model executable. It's all in test code around it. And it's okay for, I think, if the, p4.org
I agree with you,
is
Andy.
GPL code, GPL test code, as long as we're sure it's test code and doesn't.
I agree with you. I just want to make sure that this issue is closed once and for all, and we can.
It will not be closed once and for all until there is a lot of test cases.
Unless there is a lawsuit and a trial, right?
until there are precedent in case law, that cannot be settled.
Yeah,
And even once there is, that can change over time, right? That this will be a never ending. This is law, not science. Yep, that's the best we can do is, answer. And that might end up being err on the side of caution and make those test files GPL might be the answer. But anyway, if you're interested in participating in that, feel free to read that document, provide comments on it, contact me if you'd like to get involved. But yeah, the two main GPL issues that I see are the SCAPI library question, which it'd be nice if we didn't have to GPL, it didn't infect files that import it, but we'll find out from Linux Foundation, hopefully. And then the eBPF code that actually runs in the kernel. So those two questions are the ones that I see as potentially leaving some GPL code in our public repos. Okay. But yeah, that will be an ongoing topic that we will not finish today.
So on the license, Andy, so there is a separate issue that I think we need to highlight.
Okay.
So Intel Tofino SDE includes some third-party code, which is under fairly restrictive license. It's probably better to address as the first part when Tofino SDE release. But anyhow, and I'm specifically talking about SerDes drivers for Tofino device. So this is something that needs to be, I think, highlighted, and hopefully Intel will provide some sort of release. At the very minimum, they should release the binaries for, I don't know, x86, or maybe they will make us a favor and compile them for ARM. If not, because without those drivers, the device is not usable.
Okay, so let me just say, an open P4 Studio issue to track this would be the best place once it's opened.
Okay.
And in fact, I would, once it's opened, you will certainly know soon. There'll be a blog article, there'll be announcements on the Zulip channel. P4 we'll have an announcement.
Okay.
And it's possible that the code you're interested in isn't even in that repo, but that's something you would be able to tell more quickly than I would.
Yeah, if it's not in the repo, then it will be only useful with the model, not even then it's probably not going to be useful, actually. No, it's not.
I don't know whether they have like the board support package and ASIC, full ASIC drivers included in that repo or not. We'll find out.
Well, they need again, actually, Andy, that's a good point. They need to make sure that their vendors can continue releasing the BSP packages, because obviously their vendors are currently under NDA. And then specifically for Edge Core, right? Because it's essentially it was Intel's development, then they need to do something about it.
To me, I would say that's between Intel and those companies to worry about. I don't see how we can get involved. What can we possibly do to affect that result that we want to affect?
Andy, we have only one shot, I think, to work with Intel, because the number of people who actually know what Tofino is getting smaller and smaller with every day.
Yep.
And
Linux Foundation is not going to get in the job of making it Tofino boards, as far as I know.
Sure, but we want to make sure that everyone is enabled, right? Just like.
Yep.
Anyway, that is the best chance for the community, I think.
Agreed. All right. Google Summer of Code 2025. Billy Dong is here. or was here. I don't see him on video, but I haven't looked.
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Thanks for joining, Billy. So Billy led the application for Google Summer Code 2024 and sent more emails than I think I was able to read. I don't think I was even involved in all of them, but helped recruit mentors. We got 4 mentors, I believe, at least, maybe more, for 2024. Do you want to talk, Billy, about a little bit about your experience and the status of 2025?
Yes, maybe first my experience, like last year, I think, yeah, we were. So first, I would just encourage anyone who wants to, also I'm willing to do this again, but if anyone wants to do it, and I will offer my help. And also I think it's, to do all this work, it's doable with a full-time job. And if you have a full-time job, so that don't worry about that. It's not as much work as you might thought. And I guess the most important thing is to like have like to get the good mentors on the project, because initially you need to get all those project ideas list, and then that's the most important thing for the application for the organization. And also later the mentors does most of the actual work to interact with the applicants and the contributors. So that's my high level summary. And what else do I need to mention?
So the
One would be-
ideas,
Go ahead.
they should be scoped ideally for an undergrad, and they should be tractable in within 3 months for an undergrad.
Yes.
And it's very important.
You don't want him to bite off too big of a task and
Or be too
get disheartened.
intimidated.
Yeah.
So maybe another thing is like, actually initially last year we get more mentors, but not all of them can have the full commitment throughout the process. So eventually we ended up with the 4 or 5 mentors. Yeah, so that's one thing from last year.
So it's good to have 2 mentors per project rather than 1 in case one of them drops out.
That's like require kind of I don't know if it's a suggestion from the GSOC organization that you have a primary mentor, and also like I forgot the name, like a support mentor who can take care of things if the primary mentor is not available. Yeah. So I think as a summary, the most scarce resource to run this project is to have enough mentors who can commit to the time frame. That limited our like the number of projects we can apply, because they don't. Usually they only allow like one primary mentor for one project. So that's the main limitation.
So I believe you and Fabian and Hari were all active mentors during 2024. I don't know, Hari or Fabian, do you want to say a few words about your experience there?
I wasn't as active. Most of the work was done by Billy. But yes, I think it was a great experience. I think, getting to at least have and supporting these sort of initiatives where the project can be done in a short period of time and helps before in areas that we see them as requiring help is useful. So I think all the projects that we wrote up, I think were fairly useful projects from the perspective of P4 as a program, overall program. So I many thanks Billy and Fabian. Actually, they're the ones who really drove this whole thing.
Fabian, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I think it was definitely worth it, and I definitely would do it again. It also gives the organization a lot of visibility among students and interested people. So I personally observe new contributors that, I mean, okay, the reason is cynical. They are interested in the GSOC money and the GSOC name, but at least they try to contribute and learn about P4 in some way. And that already exposes our organization. And then the work itself was really fun. Once you pick the right I mean, the time to pick a student, it's quite intense. Will get a lot of emails. People will try to work their way into you, and they want to be chosen. So it's, I mean, it can be an intense process, but working with the students themselves, it's enjoyable usually, because they also can be very engaged. I'm still in contact with one of them, for example, who is now also still trying to contribute to P4. And then one thing about scoping, I think it's the projects themselves. I mean, they need to be related to our organization, but they don't necessarily have to be directly contributing to P4 line code. For example, we had one mentor, Dustin, who was mostly doing some adjacent project, but it also contributed to the P4 ecosystem in some form. So the scoping, I think it can be quite broad, at least.
That was the project that was sort of more an application using P4, I think.
Yes, an application and idea using P4, which also promotes P4 as a language use case, which I think is not a bad idea. Ultimately, we also decide and make the cut which kind of projects we should suggest, right? And so we can make that decision in the TST eventually too.
I noticed, David, were you one of the mentors as well, I think?
Yeah, I co-mentor. I was co-mentor in 2 projects. So I do agree what Fabian says. So I don't have any more to say. So
Okay. One question for the mentors, I guess. I think one of the, besides mentoring being a scarce resource, I guess mentoring often includes either being a code reviewer or finding somebody able to review the code. I guess that would be one of the scarce resources too on some of the projects, some of the P4 repos, like behavioral model, I guess, going forward.
Yes, I agree.
So in some cases, it involves like coming up to speed on some of the code base, at least enough to review the contributions.
Yeah.
Which is also a nice thing to have broader knowledge of those things. So that's good. Great. Any other comments? I guess, Billy, you said maybe the current status, there isn't yet a set schedule for applications for GSOC 2025 yet, but hopefully you expect it soon.
That's as far as what I know. And maybe Fabian has something from that mentor meeting.
Well, so okay, one of the perks when you do GSOC, you also, the mentors are being invited to go to the mentor meetup in that's hosted by Google, and it's really nice. It's actually worth it. I had a great time. One of the things they discussed, that it seemed it was 20 years of GSOC, and I wasn't quite sure whether the program is going to continue. It hopefully does this year, but it's uncertain. I mean, maybe we can ping the person responsible for this, but it's not in our hands, right? So,
right. Okay. So wait and see there, and you'll let us know if you hear more. Okay.
Maybe I have one related thing that Fabian brought up previously, that there is something called a Linux Foundation Mentorship Program or something like that. That seems to be something similar.
So this is, it's not, I just set this up for a different project, so this is why I'm chiming in. The mentorship is a platform that projects can enroll their own programs into and utilize the platform, as well as like the accounting, the fundraising, the application vetting, all of that can be done through this platform that they've set up that's connected to LFX. So the mentorship program would be whatever P4 feels like would be beneficial to the project to do. And you would have to have mentors who are P4 project volunteers. And then the project can either do it as unpaid, or the governing board could choose to designate some funding to go towards these mentors or mentorships, and that the mentees would get when they either based on a time frame or milestone criteria. And typically it's set up for semesters, but you could also set it for custom timeframes. And it would involve a little bit of work to get it set up. And then there would just be the management. So we'd have to have people from either this group or from within the community who would be willing to serve as mentors for each mentorship that we offer.
So one form that could take would be a P4 summer code funded by p4.org as opposed to funded by Google.
Yeah, or you could do, you know, a fall mentorship because you really want to get this one feature added and you were willing to put a little bit of money and help a student get some experience and knock it out. So, you know, it really depends on what the goals are of the project and what you think would be useful. It's entirely up to y'all. And that can also change. Like we can modify different, either an ongoing mentorship that's available every spring, for example, or if you know it's kind of a case by case basis, it's really up to y'all.
And so, yeah, as the TST, they tend to want to hear from the governance board likes to hear from the TST on things that we recommend. And so they'd be open to listening to requests for funding such a thing if we thought it was a good idea.
For sure.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, quick time check. We got 15 minutes left on the scheduled item. I copied and pasted a list of 2025 events from the last meeting that we talked about then. I didn't have anything new to say about them other than the Google Summer of Code, since that deadline I thought might be approaching. If I guess I'd like to open it up to any other things that folks would like to talk about other than these events, since I don't think they're high priority to address at this exact moment. If you've got other things you'd like to talk about.
The only thing before we switch over, Andy, the only other event I would potentially just flag for everybody is the annual workshop. I think there is thoughts that trying to get it to align in some way, shape, or form with the OCP summit in October would make a lot of sense. So if folks have any contacts or thoughts around that, you'd be surprised how much time and work it takes to put on one of those events, and we actually do need to get the ball rolling on it sooner rather than later. So kind of answering that question around when it should be
the
hosted.
October 14th through 16th event that you're talking about?
Yeah, because I think that means it would be what, the Monday, Tuesday before OCP, right?
Yep.
And then OCP is Wednesday through Friday, I think. So we just need to kind of make a decision about those dates in the next month or so, I would say.
So it'd be good if we're probably not gonna, unless somebody volunteers to be the general chair or program committee chair during this meeting, we as the TST should be discussing amongst ourselves about that topic before the next meeting. Any other, so if you have anything to say about the idea of P4 workshop, feel free to jump in. If you have any other topics you'd like to talk about.
Andy, again, with regards to SD and open sourcing, so how do we want to kind of track the progress? So you said that there should be an announcement at some point. What should we do if there is no announcement? And what should we do if there is not enough inside the announcement and so on?
So there'll be an open P4 Studio repo that, I mean, like I say, if it takes more than a week to make public, I'd be surprised at this point, given that almost every I has been dotted and T has been crossed from Intel's side on that repo.
Okay.
As public, creating issues on that with questions would be a good way to track further things, I think.
Okay.
And we'll bring it up at future TSTs if there's questions that this is an appropriate forum to bring up questions if those don't move forward.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Great to talk to you. Happy New Year. And see you next month. Quickly, I think the plan is that the cadence of these meetings will be first Fridays of the month, I think is the plan.
Yeah, I think this one just got bumped, so everybody kind of had a chance to
For the January.
buy from vacation. So yeah, next one is scheduled for Friday the 7th at 10 a.m. Pacific.
Oh, it's not February 3rd? Or maybe I'm just completely confused. When I looked at the calendar.
The previous Friday is January 31st. So the first Friday in February is the 7th.
Makes sense. All right, February 7th then is the plan for the next public TST meeting. Hope to see you then.